One-time Hollywood studio chief Harvey Weinstein has a rape conviction overturned. What made the trial invalid and why it may not change much? Police arrest hundreds of student protesters at pro-Palestine campus demonstrations across the country. We have the latest on the growing tension. Southwest Airlines is grounded service at 4 airports. The carrier reports losing more than $200 million in the first quarter. Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Stephanie Cox. President Trump is in court on day 7 of his criminal trial in New York. Prosecutors now accuse Trump of violating a gag order 4 more times as Trump argues for his free speech rights and campaigns outside the courtroom. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao, who's outside the courthouse in New York. Good afternoon, Iris. What's the latest in this trial?
Good afternoon to you, Steph. So the trial has now resumed after a lunch break for more testimony from David Pecker, a former tabloid executive. And he said this morning that after talking with Trump and former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, he helped to negotiate, buy, and then bury a story related to former Playboy model Karen McDougal, who said she had an affair with Trump, but that Trump has denied that claim. And Pecker also testified that the goal of the alleged catch and kill scheme was to prevent harm to Trump's campaign in 2016, adding that Trump thanked him personally for doing it afterward. Trump, meanwhile, did not react much while inside the courtroom, but when he was outside the courtroom this morning, he spoke out against the gag order now placed against him. Let's take a look.
My constitutional rights have been taken away from me. Every respected scholar has said this is no case. There is no case here. This is just a political witch hunt.
The judge in this New York court trial today could rule on the district attorney's motion to try to fine Trump for allegedly violating the gag order. The prosecutors today also further accused Trump of violating gag order 4 more times, pointing to Trump's recent remarks, including in this week calling Mike Cohen a convicted liar, and also just this morning saying that Pecker is a, quote, nice guy. And this morning, Trump was meeting with construction workers here in Manhattan around 6 a.m. before he went into the courthouse, and also, he was addressing the latest GDP news in a way to campaign despite not being able to hold actual campaign events. Let's take a look.
New York, we have a good chance of winning New York, in my opinion, but we're going to give it a shot.
The GDP just announces all the way down to 1.6%, and it's heading south. The numbers are very bad. This is Bidenomics.
And during the lunch break that ended just now, Trump went on Truth Social to post a bunch of links pointing to his event this morning, showing how popular he was among the construction workers. And also in one of the posts, he said, quote, "You can't stop Donald Trump." Back to you, Steph.
All right, thank you, Iris. We'll have more on this in our Capitol Report, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific. Thank you again. The Supreme Court just heard oral arguments over whether former President Trump is immune from criminal prosecution for his actions while in office. An appeals court in Washington previously rejected his attempt to claim immunity. NTD's Jack Bradley joins us from outside the Supreme Court.
Good afternoon, Steph. Well, the justices appeared divided on the presidential immunity case. This all boils down to special counsel Jack Smith, who brought charges against former President Donald Trump, alleging that he interfered with the 2020 election results. Now, President Trump has pled not guilty, and he said that he was acting in his official capacity as president. He said that the presidential immunity is important because without it, presidents would not act on anything, as they would fear retaliation when they left office. Now, we spoke to many protesters here on the ground outside of the Supreme Court building. Here's what they had to say.
We do have a system of justice in this country, and it better not fail us, because, I mean, this is why, I mean, no one person is, no one's above the law.
It's obvious that the American people really do love Donald Trump, and that it'll be a landslide, as he puts it.
Now, this case could go either way here with the Supreme Court ruling in favor of Trump or Smith, or they could send it down to a lower court for further consideration. If they rule in Trump's favor, then the prosecution ends, and it could even impact his other criminal cases, especially the one in Georgia, the RICO case. If they rule in Smith's favor, then the presidential immunity goes away, and Trump would be tried as a regular defendant. Now, this case is important. The timing of it is important because if Trump is reelected, then he could order the Department of Justice to get rid of this case and dismiss it. Now, the justices are expected to rule on the presidential immunity by the end of June, although the timeline is unclear if it will come to fruition, the entire case, by the November election. Steph, back to you.
All right, thank you, Jack. Next up, former Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani was indicted in Arizona yesterday for allegedly seeking to overturn the 2020 presidential election in that state. He's among 18 people charged with illegally claiming electoral votes for former President Trump. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has that story.
An indictment unsealed Wednesday accuses Giuliani and other Trump allies of attempting to pressure election officials in several states to overturn the election won by President Biden. The papers also list, quote, a former U.S. president, a likely reference to Trump, although he was not indicted. The indictment names 11 defendants and redacts the names of 7 others. The Attorney General stated the names would be made public once all the defendants had been served. The indictment says the named defendants acted as pro-Trump fake electors from Arizona. In 2020, the 11 Republican electors said they were duly elected in a fair process. They said the votes they cast were procedural votes, meant to preserve Trump's claim to the presidency in case he won legal challenges to Biden's election, and not an attempt to illegally overturn the election. Giuliani's spokesperson confirmed that Giuliani's name was one of those redacted, but he is easily identifiable from his description as the mayor, who presided over a hearing in Phoenix in 2020 where he alleged negligence from election officials. Giuliani's spokesperson called the indictment an example of weaponization of the justice system that does irrevocable harm to the country. Another defendant whose name was redacted is described as chief of staff in 2020, the position Mark Meadows held at the time. Trump, Giuliani, and Meadows are co-defendants in Georgia, where they're charged with conspiring to overturn Biden's election victory in the state. They have pleaded not guilty there. Speaking after the indictment was unsealed, Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays alleged the defendants schemed to overturn a free and fair election.
Whatever their reasoning was, the plot to violate the law must be answered for, and I was elected to uphold the law of this state.
Governor Katie Hobbs weighed in, calling the alleged actions shameful.
As Secretary of State, I oversaw free, fair, secure elections in Arizona and defended the votes of millions of Arizonans. I am confident that Attorney General Mays conducted a fair and impartial investigation and grand jury process, and now the justice system will do its job.
The so-called fake elector plan plays a prominent role in the federal case against Trump, brought by special counsel Jack Smith. Smith is accusing Trump of orchestrating a grand scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
And breaking today, disgraced Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein has his 2020 rape conviction overturned by a New York appeals court. Weinstein's conviction was thrown out on a technicality by the court's 4-3 majority. The appellate justices say the trial shouldn't have included testimony of alleged prior sexual acts. Justices called this an abuse of judicial discretion. During a press conference outside of the courthouse Thursday, lawyers for Weinstein said he was found guilty because he was unpopular.
And in this courthouse behind us at that trial, the law was not applied fairly to Harvey Weinstein. And what the Court of Appeals, the highest court in the greatest state, in the greatest country, said today is that, yes, no one is above the law, but no one is below the law either.
Weinstein will remain in prison while he awaits a new trial in New York. He was convicted of another rape in Los Angeles in 2022. Weinstein's critics say that while they're disappointed in the ruling, they note that it's based on legal technicalities and not an exoneration of Weinstein's behavior. President Biden and 17 world leaders are calling for the release of the remaining hostages in Gaza. A statement released today says freeing the hostages would lead to a prolonged ceasefire. The statement reads, "We call for the immediate release of all hostages held by Hamas in Gaza now for over 200 days. They include our own citizens." The leaders wrote, "The fate of the hostages and the civilian population in Gaza, who are protected under international law, is of international concern." White House administrators confirm the order is endorsed by Biden, together with the heads of 17 other nations, including the UK, France, and Canada. The countries all have citizens who were being held or are missing in Gaza following Hamas's attacks in Israel last October. And we have more updates on the anti-Israel protests on college campuses. Police arrested hundreds of protesters at college campuses across the nation last night. 108 people were arrested at Emerson College in Boston, and 4 officers were injured in the process. The school said the student encampment violated city law. Police arrested 93 people at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. This ended the protest, and the campus remains closed until further notice. 34 people were arrested at the University of Texas at Austin, but anti-Israel protests continue to spread to more college campuses. According to NBC News, there are student encampments at 20 campuses across the country. They're now showing up at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., New York City's Cornell University, and Northwestern University in Illinois. And continuing with this same coverage spreading across college campuses, NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with Rabbi Yaakov Menken, Managing Director of the Coalition for Jewish Values, for analysis.
Rabbi Yaakov Menken with the Coalition for Jewish Values. Good to see you again.
Good to be back with you.
You've seen reports about the anti-Israel protests spreading on American college campuses. What's your reaction to that?
Right now, we have a very stark choice on American campuses. Do you want to have Jews or do you want to have anti-Semitic barbarians? Columbia University has literally been taken over by the Nazis. They told the students that they can have their encampment, and at that point, the Orthodox rabbi of the campus told students, go home.
How did the U.S. get to this point, where Ivy League institutions, some of their professors and students, have seemed to express sympathies with extremist ideologies?
In the case of the United States, a lot of it started with the student generation, succeeding generations of left-wing indoctrination. First, what came up, support for communism, support for socialism, and then support for Jew hatred under a new name. And now the last generation's indoctrinated students are this generation's professors. So that's how you end up with tenured professors teaching anti-Semitic stupidities instead of actual instruction in the nature of academia.
Some universities have seemed reluctant to stop these demonstrations, and a lot of media outlets call Hamas a militant group, not a terrorist organization. Where does this seeming lack of solidarity with the Jewish people in major institutions come from?
It's that same bigotry. Look at every other army and in prosecuting. Do you know how many civilians, hundreds of thousands of civilians were killed in Afghanistan and Iraq in the wake of 9/11? Nobody accused America of committing a genocide or said that their efforts to remove Saddam Hussein and his army was somehow genocidal. Everybody understood immediately what the truth was. But when it comes to Jews, there's a peculiar, strange narrative that has nothing to do with the truth. You know, the idea that Israel's conduct in Gaza is genocidal. Israel is doing more to avoid civilian casualties than any other army in the world, bar none.
Going forward, how can universities better handle these anti-Israel protests on their campuses and better protect Jewish students?
They have to follow the University of Texas, Austin, and Princeton model. These demonstrate, if you want to take over and do an encampment, you don't get to do that on campus. That's not called free speech. Free speech is when you get to articulate your views in a debate, not when you shout other people down, not when you block entrances to buildings, not when you prevent Jews from accessing classes, as has now happened at Columbia. This is just outrageous. And the idea that they're saying, oh, it's a free speech issue, is because they're trying to hide their vicious hatred behind a fig leaf. They want to destroy civilization. They are not the folks building it up. And that's how it needs to be responded to. How do you deal with violent criminals? You lock them up.
Rabbi Yaakov Menken, thank you.
No, that was great.
New numbers show about half of Americans are in support of mass deportations of illegal immigrants, including many Democrats. This as more states are taking measures to fight illegal immigration. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
A new Harris poll conducted for Axios released on Thursday shows that 51% of Americans support mass deportations of illegal immigrants. Not just Republicans, but also 42% of Democrats say they'd support that. And 30% of Democrats and 46% of Republicans say they'd end birthright citizenship. That right has been guaranteed under the 14th Amendment for over 150 years. Meanwhile, in other immigration-related news, Oklahoma is on track to become the latest state to pass state laws against illegal immigration. Similar to a controversial law in Texas, the Oklahoma law would make it a state crime for illegal immigrants to enter Oklahoma. Earlier this month, Iowa's governor signed a similar bill into law. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
American and European conservatives share common concerns over elections, immigration, and the war in Ukraine. Our correspondent Luis Martinez is in Budapest, Hungary, with the latest from CPAC 2024.
Conservatives in Europe and the United States know that 2024 is a crucial year, with over 4 billion people in over 60 countries heading to the booths to elect government officials. Most notably in the European Union in June, they will have parliamentary elections that will determine the composition of the EU Parliament for the next 5 years. And in November, the United States will hold presidential elections. Let's listen to what Prime Minister Viktor Orban had to say about the electoral cycle this year.
I am very hopeful that in the future, instead of all sorts of NGOs and large corporations and media centers and suspicious experts and suspicious academicians, it will be popularly elected representatives and politicians who will chart the course to walk on.
I spoke with Gavin Wax, the president of the New York's Young Republican Club, and he believes this year Republicans and conservatives will vote for politicians who are willing to enact the policies that they campaign on.
And listen, I think we've had many decades of very weak and feckless and frankly milquetoast Republican leadership. I think a lot of people have been disappointed, in terms of Republicans delivering on their message, delivering on their campaign promises, and they're looking for more aggressive forms of conservatism. They're looking for more populist energy. They're looking for people that are willing to push the envelope, to use state power, to actually enact their agenda, not just talk about it.
Another issue of common concern among conservatives worldwide is immigration. I spoke with Colombian Senator Maria Fernanda Cabal, and she highlighted the weaponization of immigration by criminal enterprises.
Mass migration has turned to be a weapon against the free world because, of course, you cannot hide there's an economic necessity of people. But that's a motive that is used by all these smugglers. Then you see Chinese people and Chinese smugglers. This is, at the end, a criminal transnational organization.
It is worth noting that there are some important differences in between Americans and Europeans when it comes to the Ukraine war, particularly here in Hungary, because Hungary has borders with Ukraine.
There will be no solution on the battlefield for this war, and as an outcome, Europe, the European economy, suffers a lot because of this war. Should there be peace, at least ceasefire and peace talks, that would be better not only for Europe, but for the US as well, in my eyes, because the US is interested in a strong Europe.
While European and American conservatives have marked differences when it comes to the Ukraine war, they also have marked similarities when it comes to TikTok. Over 10 countries in the European Union have restricted, one way or another, the social media app. Reporting from Budapest, Hungary, Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
When we come back, the U.S. economy cooled more than expected in the first quarter of the year. The GDP is showing the weakest pace of growth since the second quarter of 2022, when the economy contracted. NTD's Don Ma has those stories in today's Business Brief. And Southwest Airlines will stop flying to 4 airports. The decision comes after the airline reports a more than $200 million first quarter loss. That and more after the break.
More than just beautiful dance. It's a touch of the divine. More than just legends. It's the beautiful culture and wisdom of China before communism. More than just a performance. It's an experience that awakens the soul.
Lincoln Center, NJ-PAC, State Theater, Purchase, and Stamford. Starting March 28th. Tickets at shenyun.com.
No young person should ever have to worry about having a safe place to sleep at night, or a warm meal to eat, or whether anyone cares about them.
I grew up in poverty, and I actually became physically homeless right after I had turned 16.
I didn't have anywhere to sleep, and I didn't really have friends or family that could support me.
To be homeless as a teen, I didn't ask for that.
1 in 10 young adults will experience a form of homelessness this year, and that's unacceptable. But the good news is there is an organization making a big difference, Covenant House.
For the young people who didn't ask to be put in unthinkable situations, Covenant House is there providing safety, hope, and a brighter future. Call or go online now. For a gift of only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love.
For over 50 years, Covenant House has been helping youth in crisis and giving them the support and tools they need to succeed in life.
Without the Covenant House, I honestly could not tell you where I would be today.
Call or go online right now to safeplacetosleep.org with your gift of just $19 a month. With your monthly donation, you'll receive this soft, comforting blanket as a reminder of the warmth and safety your gift will provide a young person tonight.
I would not be here today if it weren't for the kindness of strangers, people who donated to Covenant House so that they could support me when I couldn't support myself.
I have no words to express how Covenant House changed my life.
Your monthly gift is urgently needed to reach young people in communities like yours who didn't ask to be put in unthinkable situations.
Your support makes the work of Covenant House possible.
Call or go online to safeplacetosleep.org with your gift of just $19 a month.
These are all farmers. Maybe
no,
not
there's
this
not a
one.
farm anymore.
But here's a farm, right?
No, there's also not a farm anymore.
All these people shut down because of the government policies?
Yeah.
The government wants to control the food. So we don't eat meat, but we eat insect.
As the price of staples goes through the roof, people will say, I can't afford a steak anymore. So, all right, I'll eat your stupid crickets.
Southwest Airlines will stop flying to 4 airports as it copes with weak financial results and delays in getting new planes from Boeing. The carrier will also limit hiring and ask employees to take time off. In August, Southwest will stop flying to Cozumel, Mexico, Syracuse, New York, Bellingham, Washington, and George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston. Southwest hasn't left an airport since 2019 when it pulled out of Newark, New Jersey. The airline reported a $230 million first quarter loss today. The Dallas-based carrier also said it expects to receive only 20 new 737 MAX 8 jets from Boeing this year. That's less than the 46 it expected just a few weeks ago. And a laden cargo ship passed through a newly opened deepwater channel in Baltimore today after the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed 4 weeks ago. It was one of several vessels that were stranded in port due to the accident. The vessel is one of 5 expected to pass through the new temporary waterway. The new channel will remain open until Monday or Tuesday. The port's main channel is set to reopen next week. And the nation's economy slowed sharply last quarter in the face of high interest rates, but consumers kept spending at a solid pace. Here's NTD's Don Ma with today's business brief.
Thank you very much, Steph. U.S. economic growth slowed more than expected in the first quarter, and this is what we're talking about today first. Gross domestic product increased at a 1.6% annualized rate last quarter. This is the Commerce Department's advanced estimate of first quarter GDP earlier today. So this 1.6% growth was largely supported by consumer spending. Now, just for a comparison for you, the economy grew at a 3.4% rate in the fourth quarter. So it was a lot higher previously. And the economy's gradual slowdown reflects in large part the much higher borrowing costs for homes and auto loans, credit cards, and many business loans that have resulted from the 11 interest rate hikes the Federal Reserve imposed in its drive to slow down inflation. Meanwhile, in China, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken today called on Beijing to provide a level playing field for American businesses as he began a visit there. So State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said that at a meeting with China's top official in Shanghai, Blinken raised concerns about China's, quote, trade policies and non-market economic practices. Blinken, as well, also stressed that the United States seeks a healthy economic competition with China and a level playing field for U.S. workers and firms operating in China. And finally, let's talk about the consumer. From Nestle to Danone, food companies are seeing shoppers that want either premium or cheaper products, with seems like less interest in the middle. Particularly in developed markets like North America that we're seeing this. The packaged goods industry has for over 2 years hit shoppers with higher prices, citing higher costs that started with the pandemic and were exacerbated by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So everything from sunflower oil to freight has become more expensive, taking a toll on global supply chains. And consumers are struggling to make ends meet. Executives have in recent quarters reported that costs are rising at a slower pace and have eased up on price hikes, so that's good. But in some cases, prices are still rising because companies say they are innovating to create better products that are helping them win over wealthy shoppers. At the same time, though, they say hard-up shoppers are more focused than ever on bargains, particularly in the United States. All right, Steph, that's all from me. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Don. And thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Stephanie Cox. We'll have more stories from the U.S. and around the world. Join Tiffany Meyer for the NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific.